Hey guys, Troy again, and got two more pens to show you today. It was my wife's pen mail day, so I've got two Chinese pens to show you. And I don't mind dealing with writing with inexpensive Chinese pens because actually there's so many of them out there nowadays, and they actually perform fairly well for the amount of money that you're spending. So if you guys remember one of the videos that we did where a very nice viewer of ours had sent a bunch of pens to my son Matthew. This particular pen, it is Uranus is the brand name. Now Uranus is a sub-brand of Duke. So if you've seen Duke fountain pens that are Chinese manufactured and sold, Uranus is a sub-brand of it. So we got this pen. My wife liked it enough that she went and got her own. So we got this in the mail, and I inked it up for her, and it actually writes fairly well. I mean, it's not a very big pen. You can see that my paw's maybe just a little bit on the big side, but it's a screw top. And it's not a very long pen, but it fits just long enough in my hand to be able to be comfortable without having to be capped or posted, rather. So when you look at it, the first impression is, okay, it's an inexpensive plastic. And it is. I mean, good grief, these pens are like $6 and under on eBay right now. And I've only seen two colors, and you know what? These were the two colors that I saw on eBay. But the only marking you're going to have right here is the brand right here that says Uranus in a white logo below the clip, and that's the way it is on both the green and this pink pen here. So you've got the little clip here. It's a nothing special clip. It actually is very functional, very stiff, however, but you have to unscrew an awful lot to get it off. That's one downside to it. But post it, you can hold it, and you know what? It's got a nice little steel nib. Believe it or not, this little steel nib does better than you would think for a plastic Chinese fountain pen. This particular pen did come with a converter, and I have filled that sucker up. I do believe I put in like Papier Plume Cherry Red ink into this one here. And it's got one of those fairly inexpensive slide converters. Really easy to use. Not my favorite. I'm not a big fan of that style of converter. I prefer the twist rather than the slide, because to me they just seem to work better. But it does have an agitator in there to try to break up the surface tension. So, but this particular pen, even though it's fairly small and expensive, it actually writes fairly well. So I'll show you a little bit of that here in just a little bit. So, not a bad pen for $6 and under. It's kind of hard to go wrong with it. It is priced significantly more than Jinhao's that you're going to get for like $2 or so. But I don't think you're overpaying for it necessarily. If you can get it in the $5 range, $4 range, actually I think that's a fairly decent price. But right now I'm seeing them on eBay looking here at about $6 or so. So if you can find them at a decent price, then good for you. You'll get a fairly decent purchase. I've also shared with you another brand pen, Aihao, A-I-H-A-O. I've seen one other reviewer do an Aihao pen, and they did this particular model, the 2025 model. And, this was like a 99-cent pen. And it's delivered from overseas. Actually, both of these came from China, or this one actually came from Malaysia or something like that, rather than through China, I think. Because I had given one to my son, and my mother-in-law wanted one, so I went through several of those. I finally ordered a replacement for myself, and it was, $1.06, somewhere in there. So, I got this one here, but that's not the one I wanted to talk about here and show you. But I did want to show you that Aihao is a brand that I'm familiar with, that I've used. What I found on this particular brand, I was not able to put a converter into it. It would not take anything but the Aihao cartridges that came with it. I tried International Standard and could not get an International Standard cartridge to work in this particular pen. This particular pen is the one my wife got. So this is also an Aihao. So you've got kind of like the demonstrator nib, demonstrator section and top to it. And you can see there's already some ink just since I inked this sucker up today that has kind of splattered inside that clear cap. This is a about a $3 or $4 pen. Looking right now, $3.99 plus shipping. And they want like $4 to ship it, but those actually come, I think, 12 refills or 12 cartridges along with those. So maybe, you know, you can get these fairly inexpensive as well. But this one here is a model number, oh, come on, you're right here. I know, I just saw you a few minutes ago. Oh, number 202503. That's the model number, 202503. So it looks like a metal body, but it's not. It's actually plastic. And this one does come with a converter, and it's the same kind of slide converter. So I don't know if that's an international standard converter. I'm assuming it is. Like I said, I tried this very kind of converter in that other Aihao that I had, and it did not work. I've tried international standard cartridges in that other one, and it did not work. This one appears that it would take an international standard. I don't know. I don't know if it's proprietary or not. I did not bother trying another one other than that. So, that's what that is like. Now, what I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to show you some similarities between the two Aihaos, which is why I got this one out. This one, you'll see that it's it's a semi-hooded nib, and it's a rather small point to it. They said that this was a broad. It's not a broad, and at least in the traditional sense that we're used to, and it definitely doesn't write like a broad. And when I got this one, I actually had to do some smoothing to it. This particular one here is definitely another thin nib to it. See, both pens are the same height, pretty much, and they both have the same basic body shape, except for this one here just has some demonstrator clarity to it. So, at the bottom, it's the same mold, essentially, that makes both of these. You'll see it's the same shape here, and you'll see that it's got the same style at the nib, the section down towards the nib. It's got the same curve. It's got the same style nib to it. And this one writes like a fine. This one wrote more like a fine as well. The good news is this one wrote fairly well right out of the package. I didn't have to do anything with this one to get it writing okay. This one took some smoothing, and it took a little bit of work to get it primed and writing. So, and it also had a really hard start after I sat it down for a couple of weeks. So, anyway, this little Aihao here did fairly well. And for, you know, like I can't imagine this going for too expensive when it doesn't come with a bunch of cartridges. But it's not a bad little pen, this little Aihao here. So we now have a bunch of Aihaos in the house, and we got a couple of Uranuses. Or is it Urani? I don't know. I don't know what the plural of Uranus would be. No jokes, please. So, I'm going to grab the yonder book into which I usually use pens with which to write. And I threw into that Aihao a Noodler's Green Cactus Eel. And like I said, I put in the Papier Plume Cherry Red into the Uranus pen. And you can see those two writing samples right there. So, what I'm going to do is I'll give it a quick shot here, filming a quick writing sample on both of these, and so you can actually see how it works, and just wrap up this as a much quicker video. So 2 pens, a Uranus and an Aihao, both of which cheap, inexpensive Chinese pens. Both write fairly well, not a bad value for each. So if you're looking for something inexpensive to give a child, to add to your collection just for the sake of variety, something to travel with, something to throw in your pocket, something to stash at your desk at work kind of thing, or even to give away, then you can't really go wrong with either one of these. No complaints about them. Enjoy. Alright, here's the writing portion. Here is the Aihao 202503 model pen. You pull it off and it posts very securely. So let's try it. This is the Aihao 202503 with a nib that writes like a fine, but there's no real marking on it, so it does write like a fine. But it actually, believe it or not, for the price, is actually a fairly smooth nib. It's a semi-hooded nib. It's inexpensive. It's steel, so don't expect a lot of line variation at all. And because it's a fine, especially, so nothing special when it comes to anything but being utilitarian. You're not going to get much out of it. But what it is so far is it's actually a fairly smooth writing pen that, for the price you're going to pay for this, is not a bad deal. So that's the first one. This is the Uranus pen from Duke. 3, 4, 5, 6, almost like 6 complete turns to pull it off. So this should be a medium nib that we got. So this is the Uranus by Duke, and I put in a Papier Plume Cherry Red. This should be a medium, and believe it or not, this one actually also writes a little smooth. Now, you can see on some of the beginning strokes that I took, like on that S, it's a little lighter, then it gets darker. So it starts out sometimes a little lighter. And you can see on the Y, so it doesn't keep up quite as well as you would hope. But overall, I still don't think it's that bad a writer. If you take your time with it, you write a little slower than I sometimes tend to do, you're actually going to do all right. What can I get for line variation? Well, a little more than the other pen. And I expect that because this is a traditional style nib, and the other one being the semi-hooded nib. I do expect more flex and less rigidity out of this than I do on the other. That's not to say it's not a fairly rigid nib, but it does okay. Lays down a little more ink than the other one did. So let's go ahead and put this one back up. And just because I did not try that with the other one, let's see how this Aihao does for laying down the ink. Yeah, that's not too bad either, actually. So there you go. The Aihao 20503 and the Uranus plastic pen, both of which all plastic, fairly inexpensive Chinese pens, and both not a bad bargain, I guess, really, for what you get for quality versus price.